I'm Jason Sisney of the Legislative Analyst Office. The governor's 2012-13 budget proposal estimates that the state must address a $9.2 billion budget problem between now and the start of the new fiscal year at the beginning of July. The cornerstone of the governor's plan to address this problem is his proposal that voters approve temporary increases in income and sales taxes in November 2012. The administration estimates that these taxes would generate $6.9 billion of new revenues available to help address the 2012-13 budget problem this year. The taxes from the initiative would be deposited to the general fund to help pay the state's Proposition 98 education funding obligations, as increased by the measure, and to help pay for other state programs as well. The governor's budget plan also proposes significant reductions to social services and subsidized child care programs and additional borrowing. And in the event that voters do not approve the governor's proposed tax initiative, he proposes additional trigger cuts primarily for schools and community colleges. Last year, the legislature and the governor took significant steps through ongoing budget solutions to help begin the task of returning the state budget to balance. The legislature faces a very difficult task in 2012 to finish this job, as the governor's proposal shows. The governor proposes significant multi-year tax increases, as well as reductions to social services and child care programs. And as an alternative, if voters do not accept his tax proposals, he proposes significant reductions to school funding. Either of these paths would help return the state's budget to balance over the next several years. But obviously, these are very difficult choices. California's general fund revenues are volatile, and they depend heavily on income tax payments by the wealthiest Californians. Now, the governor proposes that these Californians pay more over the next several years. And the difficulty in estimating how much those Californians will pay, how much income they're earning now and will earn over the next several years, is a reason why our revenue estimates are quite a bit lower than the administration's in 2012-13 and our estimates as well of the governor's initiative proposal. This makes the revenues of the state an even bigger question mark this year than in other years. Now, if our current revenue estimates, which will surely change over the next several months, are closer to target, it could mean the legislature and the governor have to pursue billions of dollars more of budget balancing actions than the governor proposes today. In addition to his tax proposal, the governor's budget plan includes a number of other significant proposals. For example, he proposes significant restructuring in the area of education finance, and we think that his proposal in that regard does address some fundamental shortcomings in that policy area. The governor also proposes to reduce funding for CalWORKs and subsidized child care programs. And his proposals, for example, for the CalWORKs program, serve to emphasize the importance of emphasizing work in that program. These proposals obviously involve some significant trade-offs. On the one hand, the legislature will want to consider whether some of the governor's proposed reductions in these areas are too severe, and while other savings proposals might be possible, some of these proposals might produce less savings than the governor's current plan. An important element of the governor's proposal is his trigger cut package, the cuts that would be implemented if voters do not accept his tax initiative proposal in November. Though the governor's proposal should help improve funding for education in the coming years, his trigger plan presents a number of particularly important challenges for schools in 2012-13 specifically. Because school districts will have to set up their budgets this spring for 2012-13, many of them are likely, under the governor's plan, to have to assume that the trigger cuts eventually will take effect, and thus they may have to implement many, if not all, of the very cuts that many wish to avoid. So, in considering a trigger package, the legislature is going to have to consider this issue, think very carefully about what specific level of trigger cuts would be workable and viable, and think about the tools to be given to schools, community colleges, and universities that would be most affected by the trigger cuts to respond to that scenario if it occurs. Overall, the governor's budget plan presents a very serious and very important set of choices to the legislature and to the people of the state of California. And it really shows the types of difficult decisions that will have to be made to return the state budget to balance. The governor's proposal, if it's adopted, would move the state a long way in that direction. But the legislature will have to consider its priorities as well, and what parts of the governor's proposal it wants to accept and what parts it wants to change.